So there is definitely something to say about if it's not broke, don't fix it. But I also believe that there is something to be said about doing something at least a little bit different, like let's do something a little bit outside the box. Keep it interesting, get my perks up. So yeah, Steve Hackett has released yet another live album. So let's dive into this one. The Lamb Stands Up at the Royal Albert Hall by Steve Hackett. So, Steve Hackett, I don't think needs too much of an introduction at this point. The ex-guitarist from Genesis, who then went out on his own to create some standout and seminal progressive rock masterpieces in my mind. For the last, decade and a half, if not more, he's been really finding his niche in doing these tours, doing these big Genesis and Stephen Hackett tours that kind of started with Genesis Revisited live at Hammersmith back in 2013. And I still love that record. It's mostly the classic Genesis stuff, and it's only that. But since then, he's put out, Genesis Revisited live at Royal Albert Hall, The Total Experience live in Liverpool, Wuthering Nights in Birmingham, Genesis Revisited Band and Orchestra, Selling England by the Pound and Spectral Mornings live at Hammersmith, Genesis Revisited live, Seconds Out and More, Foxtrot at 50 and Hackett Highlights, and now. So that's like 9 records, nine live records where it's kind of a cut and paste. You've got the staple Genesis tracks, and you've got a handful, bit of smattering of his own live stuff. And I feel like there is definitely a little bit of a progression within these records. Like, we are finding more of his stuff being found on these records. In fact, the first disc closes with Cinema Show and Isles of Plenty. And then we go right into The Lamb. And then that also closes with Dancing with the Moonlight Night, Firth of Fifth, and Los Endos. So, the classic Hackett Genesis tracks. There's always a part of me whenever Steve Hackett is releasing a new live album. It's like, do we actually need it? The fact that the boy is touring, I'm all for it, and I applaud him every single time he goes on the road, because the musicianships and the musicians that he's bringing along with him. You've got Roy Townsend on saxophone, woodwind, percussions, vocals, keyboards, bass pedals. You got Nad Slyvin on vocals, Craig Blondell on drums, Roger King on keyboards, and then Jonas Ringgold on bass. And you couldn't have asked for a better roster of talented prog musicians than that. Like, Nad sounds exactly like Peter did back in the day. I love what Jonas is doing within the Michael Rutherford rhythm section in that case. Craig Blondell is doing an amazing job of channeling, the incredible Phil Collins on the drums, and even in this live setting, basically having to do a double time when they were touring with Chester Thompson. Roger King is doing a great job, and so all these boys are really getting in and oomph. We do have a guest guitarist on here. Steve Rothery finds himself on Fly on a Windshield, which does a fantastic job. This isn't his first time that Steve has joined Steve. It's the Battle of Steves. All you need is Steve Wilson and Steve Howe, and you just have all Steves on the stage with them. Because I do know that Stephen Wilson was on Shadow of the Hierophant way back in the day. Anyway, I'm digressing. Yeah, so musicianship, these guys know the tracks and know how to get the juice out of these tracks, and it still sounds fresh, all these years out. But, there's some things about this record that really scratch my head. The first off is that it doesn't cover all of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and I'm not even that sad that it doesn't cover all of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. But there's a few odd choices that they decide to do. They almost don't cover anything from the second disc. The only things that they cover from the second disc are Willie White Lilith, that's always a fun one to try to say, The Lamia, which he has done multiple times in the past, and It. That's it. So there's no Waiting Room. There's no Colony of Slippermen. There's no The Light Dies Down on Broadway. There's no The Raven and, Riding the Squee. I would have loved to hear Riding the Squee, going through all that and hear that being presented live, especially with The Lamb coming out in this big, massive box set in a, a month and a half or so. Like it's coming up. It's supposed to be out now, but issues came about. So that was a little bit of a, oh man. But they still do a number of tracks from the first disc. Obviously, you got the title track, you got Fly on Windshield, the Broadway melody of 74. Hairless Heart, I'm very glad they did, because that was basically Steve's track. I just wish, I don't know, do I want them to do Back in New York City and Counting Out Time? If I'm being perfectly honest, I don't care about those two tracks, but I would have loved to have Hairless Heart be the sandwich piece between two other tracks, like doing it from Broadway melodies and then going into Carpet Crawlers, which again, it's a great track, but I feel like that's one that we've heard many, many times. Now, I am glad that they did the Chamber of 32 Doors, because I do feel like that track gets overlooked because of Carpet Crawlers, but I also would have loved to hear In the Cage. That's one of the big prog pieces on here, and even though I know, and this is one of the reasons why I'm pretty sure Steve left it off, those aren't necessarily his tracks. Like, he didn't really add too much to those tracks, but I would have loved to see how he could have enhanced or done something a little bit differently. Yes, In the Cage is definitely more of a Tony track with Michael Rutherford, but I would have loved to hear what Steve would have done with that, kind of being his baby in that case. Like, what would he have done differently? So yeah. Let's also talk about the choices of tracks that he did in the first half. And honestly, I really love what he chose. Like, he chose some of his big tracks. Obviously, he did Every Day, which I absolutely love. He did also A Tower Struck Down from the first album of his, and I'm surprised that he didn't do more outside of The Shadow of the Hierophant, which is a staple at this point. But I almost wish that he did like the reprisal of that. Obviously, it starts off like A Tower Struck Down is kind of like another sandwich track. Like, you had the intro, you have this, and then you have the reprisal. And I almost wish he kind of did that. But, I mean, Hands of the Priestess, Low Notes, and High Hopes are still great. And I am glad that he kind of went a little bit more into his deep cuts, like Casino Royale and Circo Inferno he's done a number of times. But I'm glad that he's still unearthing and he's still kind of, not necessarily perfecting, but still having a good time with that. So I'm glad that he's, still keeping those tracks within his roster and all that. So yeah, in the end, this is a tough one, right? Like, this is a tough one. Do you need to run out immediately and grab it? No. If you're a fan of Steve Hackett, if you are a fan of Genesis and you enjoy his music and you've heard his past works, you don't really need this one. I think if you're like a diehard fan and you want to collect everything that he's done, then yeah, go for it. I think you'll have a great time. But this isn't one that's like the Genesis Revisited Band and Orchestra, where he included a full orchestra to help, pad up some of these tracks. This isn't quite like his Foxtrot at 50 and Hackett Highlights, where he did the entire album of Foxtrot plus a number of his highlights. And the only reason why I picked that one up is because that was one of the ones that I actually saw live and I wanted to revisit it. And so in that case, I can also see why people would want to pick this one up. If you saw the live show and you want to relive it, then absolutely. But I mean, there's nothing really all that spectacular or new that hasn't already been done on his past Genesis Revisited and live experiences, outside of the fact that it's just another really great one. So yeah. I think in the end, I will give the final rating for this album as The Land Stands Up at the Royal Albert Hall by Steve Hackett is one that I would absolutely download. Again, all of these albums are, getting a lot of praise, and rightly so. Like, they're still amazing. They have some of the best music ever recorded. It's just, are we oversaturating the market at this point? Like, the music itself in isolation is brilliant and fantastic, and I absolutely recommend it. But because we already have 9 albums that are basically doing the same thing without too much variation, I don't know. For me, I'm not going to be running out and picking this one up like I did Foxtrot at 50, Genesis Revisited Band and Orchestra, or the first two of Genesis Revisited Live at Hammersmith and Genesis Revisited Live at the Royal Albert Hall. Still, to this day, those two are probably my favorite of his, and I'll just kind of check in with Steve Hackett every handful of years whenever he's dropping something new. Honestly, if you are looking for something new, check out Live Magic at Trading Boundaries, the other live record that he put out this year, because honestly, I think that one really is something special. You know, it's just him and the acoustic guitar, and it's much more of an acoustic set, and he's redoing and reinterpreting a number of tracks that he's done before, and that's what I want to see. I want to see something new. I want to see something interesting. I want to see something different, and Live Magic at Trading Spaces does that and provides it for me. So I would actually recommend that record before I would recommend this one, only because this album's been done a number of times before. So that's what I've got for That's what I've got for The Land Stands Up at the Royal Albert Hall. What did you guys think about this record? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And I think that's where I'm going to leave you guys for today. So I want to thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.